Most people already know, deep in their bones, in some quiet place they rarely visit, exactly why their life looks the way it does. They know. They simply haven't admitted it yet. Not to themselves. Not clearly. Not with enough honesty to do something about it. And that quiet knowing, that small, uncomfortable truth they keep walking past every morning, that is where we begin today. Because here is what I have found to be true after studying human behavior for more than 40 years. Your future is not hiding in some distant opportunity. It is not waiting for the right economy, the right boss, the right season of life, or the right set of circumstances. Your future is hiding in plain sight. It is hiding in the hours between when you wake up and when you go to sleep. It is folded inside the small choices you make before the world asks anything of you. It lives in what you do when nobody is watching, when no one is grading you, when there is no deadline pressing down on you, and no applause waiting at the end. Your future is hidden in your daily routine. Now, let me be careful here, because I have said this to audiences for many years, and I want to make sure you understand what I mean. I am not talking about a rigid military schedule. I am not talking about color-coded planners or 5 a.m. alarms or any particular system of productivity. Those things may have their place, but that is not the philosophy I am after. What I am talking about is something far more fundamental than habit tracking or morning routines. I am talking about a set of disciplines, small, daily, seemingly unremarkable acts that, when practiced consistently over time, compound in ways that most people never see coming. I am talking about the invisible architecture of a well-built life. And I am telling you that every person of extraordinary achievement, every person who has built something that lasts, every person who has looked back at 70 and felt genuine satisfaction, they all discovered this, sooner or later. The only question is whether you discover it early enough for it to matter. I remember a Tuesday morning in the early spring, many years ago, when I sat across a desk from a man named Earl Schoaf in Hayden Lake, Idaho. I was 25 years old. I had $6 in my pocket. I want to be precise about that because $6 is a very specific kind of broke, and I had a collection of promises I had made to my wife and my family that I was nowhere close to keeping. I thought I was working hard. I thought I was doing my best. I thought, like most people do, that my circumstances were conspiring against me. Mr. Schoaf looked at me with the kind of patience you only find in a man who has seen this very conversation 1,000 times. And he asked me something I had not been asked before. He said, "Jim, what do you do with your days?" Not, "What are your goals?" Not, "What do you want?" Not, "How do you feel about your life?" He asked what I did with my days. I stumbled through some kind of answer. I told him about work. I told him about the obligations and the demands and the hours I was putting in. And he let me talk. He was generous like that. And when I was done, he said quietly, "Jim, you are confusing activity with discipline. They are not the same thing." I did not fully understand it that morning, but I wrote it down, and I carried it with me. And over the years, as I watched some people flourish and others flounder, with the same education, the same opportunities, the same economy, I began to understand exactly what he meant, and it changed everything. Activity is motion. Discipline is direction. Most people are busy. I want to be careful not to say they are lazy, because the majority of struggling people are not lazy. They are busy. They are moving. They are filling their days with motion. But motion without direction is exhausting, and it is pointless. And after years of it, it leaves a person depleted and wondering what went wrong. Discipline is different. Discipline is choosing each day to do the things that align with where you want to go. Not where the current of the day is pushing you, not where it is easiest to drift, but where you have decided to go. That decision, made consistently, made quietly, made in the early morning before the world has a chance to distract you, that is the beginning of an extraordinary life. Now, some people hear the word discipline and they hear punishment. They hear restriction. They hear the closing of doors. But I want to offer you a different way to see it. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is the price of freedom. Every person I have ever known who lived freely, who chose their work, their time, their associations, their days, every one of them paid for that freedom with discipline, practiced long before the freedom arrived. The person who is undisciplined does not gain freedom. They trade their freedom for the comfort of the moment. They trade the life they could have for the ease of the life they have. And there is a price for that too. It is simply paid later, and it is far more expensive. Think of it this way. Two people plant fields side by side in spring. The first farmer plants carefully, tends the soil, weeds consistently, waters when it needs watering. The second farmer sleeps in, tends to other things, tells himself he will get to the field tomorrow. In the summer, both fields look reasonably similar. Perhaps the second farmer even congratulates himself. Things are fine, nothing bad has happened. But come harvest, when autumn arrives, the difference is not subtle. One field is abundant, the other is sparse. The harvest does not lie. Your daily routine is your field. You plant in it every day, whether you intend to or not. Every book you read is a seed. Every conversation you choose, every hour you spend, every discipline you practice or avoid, these are seeds. And winter will come. Winter always comes. The question is whether you planted in the seasons when planting was possible. Life comes in seasons. You cannot change the seasons, but you can change your disciplines within the season. And that is where the power lives. Let me talk to you about something specific now, about what the daily routine of an extraordinary life actually looks like. Not a schedule, not a template you can copy, but the principles underneath the schedule, the philosophy beneath the routine, the understanding that makes the small actions meaningful. Because here is what I have found. Most people know what to do. This is the remarkable thing. If I asked you right now, if I sat with you over coffee and asked you what you would need to do differently to have the life you say you want, you would tell me. You would tell me within 5 minutes. You would say, I should read more. I should spend my time more wisely. I should be more selective about who I spend my evenings with. I should start that thing I keep putting off. I should save more, spend more carefully, invest in my education, take care of my body. You know, almost everyone knows. The gap is not in the knowing, the gap is in the doing. And the reason the doing does not happen consistently is almost never laziness. It is almost always philosophy. It is how you see the world. It is what you believe about yourself, about time, about what is possible, about what you deserve. And until the philosophy changes, the behavior cannot change in any lasting way. So before we talk about what to put in your daily routine, I want to spend time on something more important. I want to talk to you about how to think about your daily routine. Because if you get the thinking right, if you genuinely understand why these small daily disciplines matter so profoundly, the what will take care of itself. Here is the first thing I want you to understand. Your daily routine is not background. It is not the setting in which your life takes place. It is not the ordinary time you fill between the important moments. Your daily routine is the main event. It is where your character is formed and where your future is constructed, one quiet hour at a time. I remember my father. He was a farmer in southwestern Idaho, a man of few words and great consistency. He got up before the sun most days of his life, not because someone told him to, not because of some productivity system, because he understood, in the way that farmers always understand, that the world rewards consistent effort applied at the right time. He did not take days off from the field because he felt tired or uninspired. The field did not care about his feelings. The crops had their own requirements, and he met them, year after year, season after season. My father was not a wealthy man in the financial sense, but there was a richness to his life, a dignity, a rootedness, a sense of earned satisfaction that I did not fully appreciate until I was much older. He was a man who kept his commitments every day without fanfare. And when I think about what formed his character, what made him the kind of man he was, I trace it back to those daily disciplines, the ones nobody saw, the ones he never talked about, the ones he simply did because they needed doing. That is the first lesson. The things nobody sees are the things that matter most. Now let me move to something that I think is critically important, and it is this: the danger of what I call the slight edge. You may have heard this idea before. Let me give it to you the way I understand it. There are two sets of actions you can take each day. One set is slightly positive, slightly better than average, slightly more disciplined, slightly more intentional. The other set is slightly negative, slightly easier than required, slightly less rigorous, slightly more comfortable. And here is the terrible truth. In any given day, neither set of actions produces a visible, measurable result. The person who reads for 30 minutes today will not be measurably smarter tomorrow. tomorrow. The person who skips the reading will not be measurably worse off tomorrow. This is why so many people make the wrong choice. Because in the moment, the wrong choice is invisible. The cost does not show up on the statement today. It shows up in 5 years. It shows up in 10 years. It shows up when you look at someone who started from the same place you did and has somehow built something extraordinary, and you cannot quite understand the difference between their life and yours. Because the difference happened in the invisible territory. In the 30 minutes you were watching television and they were reading. In the hour you spent complaining about the economy and they spent learning a new skill. In the daily choices that seemed, on any given day, utterly inconsequential. The slight edge works in both directions with perfect reliability. And the people who understand this, who truly feel it, not just intellectually grasp it, but genuinely feel the weight of it, these people change how they behave in the small moments. They begin to treat the small moments as though they matter, because they do. They matter enormously. Let me ask you something. If you knew that the book you read today would compound over 20 years into an understanding that would fundamentally change the quality of your thinking and your income, would you read it? Of course you would. The question is not whether you would act differently if you understood the stakes. The question is whether you can train yourself to understand the stakes even when the payoff is invisible and distant. That is the discipline of the daily routine. Not just doing the things, understanding why the things matter in a way that is deep enough to sustain the behavior through the seasons when there is no immediate reward. Some people start. That is easy. Almost everyone starts something. The new year brings fresh disciplines, fresh commitments, fresh resolve. Gyms fill up in January. Libraries issue more cards in September. Notebooks fill with plans. And then slowly, with no particular disaster to blame, the new disciplines fade. Not because the person failed dramatically, because the motivation of the moment faded, and there was no philosophy deep enough to sustain the behavior when the novelty wore off. Here is what I found to be true. Motivation gets you started. Philosophy keeps you going. If your reason for doing something is a feeling, that thing will last as long as the feeling lasts, and feelings are notoriously unreliable. But if your reason is a philosophy, a genuine understanding of how the world works, what produces results, and what your role in that process is, that philosophy will carry you through the days when you do not feel like it. And there will be many such days. There will be days when the work feels pointless and the progress invisible and the effort exhausting. And on those days, the person with a philosophy keeps going, and the person with only a mood does not. Now let me talk to you about something practical. Let me talk to you about the actual contents of a daily routine that over time will transform your life. And I want to start with the one discipline that I believe is more powerful than any other, and that almost everyone underestimates: reading. I have said this for 40 years, and I will say it again. The discipline of daily reading is one of the most powerful available to any human being on earth. Not just reading for entertainment, though there is value in that. I mean reading deliberately. Reading in the direction of where you want to go. Reading books that expand your thinking, challenge your assumptions, give you access to the best minds that have ever lived. Here is the mathematics of it. If you read 10 pages per day, just 10 pages, which takes perhaps 15 minutes, in a year you will have read roughly 12 to 15 books. In 5 years, 60 to 75 books. In 10 years, more than 100. Now think about what is inside those books. Think about the distilled wisdom, the hard-won lessons, the life experiences, the research, the philosophy that lives inside 100 books carefully chosen in the direction of your goals and your growth. Do you know how many people read 100 books on a subject of importance to them? Almost none. It is extraordinarily rare, which means that if you simply practice this one discipline, this one quiet, daily, unsexy discipline, over 10 years, you will be among the most well-read people in your field or your community. Not because you are smarter than others, because you were more disciplined. Because you chose every day to invest 15 minutes in your own mind. Miss a meal, but don't miss your reading. I mean that. I remember sitting in an airport. It was a November afternoon. I think it was in Atlanta. And I watched the people around me. Some were reading. Most were not. Most were flipping through magazines or staring at the ceiling or talking about nothing in particular. And I thought about how, if the same group of people had made a decision 10 years earlier to read for 30 minutes each day, how different their conversations would be, how different their options would be, how different the quality of their thinking would be. The library is one of the great treasures of civilization. Not the building, though the building is something worth admiring, but the idea that the wisdom of thousands of human lives, the thinking of the greatest minds in history, the lessons of great triumphs and great failures, is available to anyone willing to sit quietly and read. For almost nothing. For the cost of the time and the discipline. Most people never collect on this treasure. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. I am not diminishing the value of formal education. It has its place, and I have always encouraged people to pursue it. But the education that ends when the degree is granted, the education that stops on graduation day, that education is simply not sufficient to navigate the complexity of a full life. The world changes, the marketplace changes, the requirements of leadership and success change, and only the person who continues to learn, who treats every year as a new semester in the school of their own life, only that person can keep pace with the changes and rise above them. Here is a question to ask yourself. What are you studying right now? Not enrolled in, studying. What subject are you pursuing with intention? What skill are you deliberately building? What book is on your nightstand that you are actually reading? If the answer is nothing, if you have allowed your education to end, then your growth has also ended. And a life that has stopped growing has, in a very real sense, begun to decline. The daily discipline of learning, of reading, of studying, of deliberately improving the quality of your thinking. This is not optional for those who want an extraordinary life. It is foundational. It is the first and most important stone in the foundation. Now let me talk about the second critical element of your daily routine, and that is this: the discipline of reflection. Most people are so busy doing that they never stop to think about what they are doing or why they are doing it. They race from task to task, from obligation to obligation, from one end of the day to the other, and then fall into bed exhausted, having done many things, but having reflected on almost nothing. Reflection is the discipline of returning to your day and examining it honestly. What did I do well today? What did I do poorly? What did I learn? What should I do differently tomorrow? Where did I spend my time, and was that the best use of it? Did I move closer to the life I want, or did I drift, or did I actually move away from it without realizing? These are not comfortable questions. That is the point. The comfortable questions, how was your day? Did you keep busy? Did you get everything done? These questions do not produce growth. They produce a vague sense of completion that allows you to go to sleep without having to examine anything that matters. The uncomfortable questions, these require a journal. And I have kept a journal for most of my adult life. And I believe it is one of the disciplines that has contributed most to my growth and my thinking. A journal is not a diary. It is not a record of what you ate for breakfast or what the weather was doing. A journal is where you have conversations with yourself, honest ones. It is where you work out your thinking on paper, where you examine your philosophy, where you record the ideas and the observations and the questions that come to you in the quiet moments. It is where you hold yourself accountable to yourself. I remember reading about Benjamin Franklin, a man whose daily routine has been studied and admired for centuries. He began each day with a question: what good shall I do today? And he ended each day with a question: what good have I done today? Two bookends: morning intention, evening reflection. Simple, consistent, practiced for a lifetime. The discipline of reflection does something remarkable over time. It accelerates growth, because a person who reflects on their experience extracts the lesson from every day, from every success and every failure. And a person who does not reflect, who simply lives the day and moves on, extracts almost nothing. They repeat the same mistakes because they never examined the first one closely enough to understand what went wrong. Some people live 1 year of experience 40 times. Others live 40 years of experience because they were always learning from the one they just completed. Which kind of person do you want to be? Let me talk now about your associations, about the people who populate your daily routine, because this is something that is often overlooked and almost never discussed with the seriousness it deserves. Mr. Schoaf said to me early in our conversations, "Jim, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." I have come back to this idea hundreds of times in 40 years of speaking. I have turned it over, examined it, tested it against the evidence, and I have found it to be as true as anything I know about human beings. Who you spend your time with determines, more than almost anything else, who you become. Not because human beings are weak and easily influenced, but because we are social creatures, profoundly shaped by our environment. And the environment most proximate to us is the people we choose to be around. Think about your own experience. Think about a time in your life when you were surrounded by people of energy, of ambition, of positive expectation. Did you not find yourself rising to meet that? Did you not find yourself reading more, thinking more, attempting more, expecting more from yourself? And think about a time when you were surrounded by people of complaint, of limitation, of comfortable mediocrity. Did you not find yourself settling? Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, adjusting your expectations downward to match the company. This is not about arrogance. This is not about looking down on people or cutting off those who are struggling. It is about understanding with clear eyes that the people around you are either lifting you or lowering you, and making conscious, deliberate choices about who you allow into the inner circle of your daily life. Some of the most significant changes a person can make in their daily routine require no new skill. They require only a change in association. Begin to spend more time with people who are where you want to be, people who have built what you want to build, who think in the ways you want to think, who treat their time the way you want to treat yours. And begin, gently but decisively, to reduce the time you spend with people whose philosophy and behavior lead in the direction you do not want to go. This is one of the most powerful and most underutilized levers available to you. Now, associations include not just people, but what I would call the content you allow into your mind. The books you read, we have spoken of those. But also the conversations you engage in, the programs you watch, the podcasts you listen to, the ideas you allow to take up residence in your thinking. Your mind is extraordinarily powerful, but it is also extraordinarily impressionable. Whatever you feed it consistently, it begins to accept as normal, and what it accepts as normal, it produces. Feed your mind consistently with small thinking, with complaining, with the daily recitation of why things are difficult, and why you are disadvantaged, and why the world is unfair, and your mind will produce the equivalent of those inputs. Feed your mind consistently with ideas of possibility, examples of achievement, philosophy of personal responsibility, evidence that the world rewards disciplined effort, and your mind will produce the equivalent of those inputs. You are always feeding your mind. The only question is whether you are doing it intentionally or accidentally. Let me shift now to something that I think deserves careful attention because it is perhaps the most misunderstood element of the daily routine. I want to talk about the discipline of work, not busyness, not mere activity, but genuine, focused, directed work. And I want to talk about the relationship between work and philosophy. Here is what I mean. Most people approach their work each day without a clear understanding of what they are trying to accomplish and why it matters. They show up. They do the tasks in front of them. They respond to what arrives. They manage the urgent and ignore the important. They measure their day by how busy they felt rather than by how much they moved towards something meaningful. This is not work in the deepest sense. This is administration. This is maintenance. And while maintenance is necessary, a life spent only in maintenance is not a life of growth. It is a life of holding even. And holding even is not a stable position. In a changing world, to hold even is to fall behind. The discipline of work means knowing before the day begins what the most important thing you can do today is. The thing that, if done, moves you most meaningfully in the direction you have chosen. And doing that thing first. Before the emails, before the meetings, before the interruptions, before the day has a chance to make its competing demands. You may have heard the idea of eating the frog, doing the hardest, most important thing first. The principle is sound. The daily discipline of addressing what matters most before what merely arrives. This is a practice that separates the productive from the busy, the progressive from the stationary. Now, I want to be clear about something. When I talk about the discipline of work, I am not advocating for working more hours. I am not telling you that the secret to success is to sacrifice your family, your health, your relationships, your joy, in service of some abstract idea of achievement. That is not wisdom. That is a transaction with terrible terms. What I am saying is this: work harder on yourself than you do on your job. That phrase, I have said it for decades, and I believe it with everything I have. The greatest investment you can make is in your own capacity, your knowledge, your skills, your character, your philosophy, your ability to produce value in the marketplace. Because the value you bring to the marketplace determines what the marketplace will pay you. value, and the value you bring is entirely a function of who you have become. Some people spend 40 years trying to earn more without becoming more. They focus all their energy on the external, on the job, the employer, the economy, the boss, the opportunity, and almost none of their energy on the internal, on becoming the kind of person who creates opportunities, who commands respect in the marketplace, who brings so much value that compensation is simply a natural result. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Harder on yourself. That is the discipline. Let me tell you something about the marketplace. The marketplace is a remarkable institution. It is, in the long run, extraordinarily fair. Not perfectly fair in any given moment. I am not naive about that. There are inequities, there are prejudices, there are structural disadvantages that are real and should not be minimized. And yet, across time and across industries and across cultures, the marketplace has a way of finding and rewarding genuine value. Not immediately, not without effort, not without the willingness to persist through seasons of difficult. But the person who becomes genuinely valuable, who develops rare skills, who solves important problems, who serves others with excellence, who communicates with clarity, who leads with integrity, that person finds, eventually and reliably, that the marketplace compensates them accordingly. Profits are better than wages. I have said this for a long time, and I mean it in a particular way. Wages reward your time. Profits reward your value. Wages keep you even. Profits help you grow. The person who thinks only in terms of wages is thinking about what they can get for showing up. The person who thinks in terms of value is thinking about what they can contribute, and that is a fundamentally different relationship with work. It produces a fundamentally different life. Your daily work routine, then, should be organized around a single question. What can I do today to become more valuable, to serve better, to produce more, to solve a harder problem, to develop a skill that fewer people have, to bring more of myself to what I do? Ask that question every day and act on the answer. Now let me talk about the discipline that most people know they need and most people resist the longest, the discipline of health. I am not going to talk to you about diet and exercise in any particular prescriptive way. That is not my expertise, and there are others better qualified. What I want to talk to you about is the philosophy of your body and why it belongs in your daily routine as a non-negotiable discipline. Here is the simple truth. Your body is the vehicle in which you travel through your life. Every ambition you have, every relationship you want to deepen, every contribution you want to make, every experience you want to have, all of it depends on this vehicle functioning well. And yet, a remarkable number of people treat their bodies as an afterthought. They would never treat their car with such indifference. They change the oil. They keep fuel in the tank. They attend to the warning lights. But they walk past the warning lights of their own bodies for years. The daily discipline of physical care is not vanity. It is stewardship. It is the recognition that the quality of everything else in your life, your thinking, your energy, your patience, your creativity, your capacity for joy, is profoundly influenced by the condition of your body. You cannot think clearly when you are chronically exhausted. You cannot bring your best to your work or your family when you are depleted. You cannot be fully present in the moments that matter when your body is fighting against you. So the discipline of health belongs in the daily routine not as punishment or obligation, but as wisdom. As the recognition that a well-tended body is a multiplier. It multiplies the value of everything else you do. I remember a period in my late 30s when I had allowed this discipline to slip. I was traveling constantly, eating poorly, sleeping too little, exercising not at all. And I noticed, gradually, then all at once, that my thinking was slower, my patience was shorter, my energy by midday was nearly gone. I was still working hard, but the quality of the work had declined. And when I began to tend to my body again, to sleep properly, to move regularly, to eat with more intention, it was like adjusting a lens. Things came back into focus. The work was better. The energy was better. The relationships were better. Your body is speaking to you every day. The discipline is in whether you are listening. Let me talk now about the discipline of financial design, about what belongs in your daily and weekly routine with respect to money. Because this is an area where the gap between what people know and what people do is perhaps wider than any other. Most people understand, at least in principle, that spending less than they earn and saving saving and investing the difference is the foundation of financial independence. This is not complicated. It does not require an advanced degree in finance. The mathematics are straightforward. And yet, the vast majority of people, regardless of their income level, live at or above their means, not because they cannot do otherwise, but because they have not established the disciplines to do otherwise. The discipline of financial design begins with a decision, not a hope, not a vague wish, not a resolution that fades by February, a decision. The decision to live deliberately below your means, to invest consistently in your financial future, to treat the building of wealth as a daily discipline rather than a future event. Let me give you a simple picture. Two people earn the same income. One spends everything they earn, manages occasional splurges on credit, and begins each month roughly where they ended the last one. The other lives slightly below their means, perhaps 10% below, and invests that 10% consistently. Not dramatically, not heroically, just consistently. In 1 year, the difference between these two people is not impressive. In 5 years, it is noticeable. In 20 years, it is the difference between two entirely different lives. One person has options, the other has obligations. One person chooses their work because they love it. The other stays in work they resent because they need the income. One person has the dignity of financial independence. The other has the anxiety of financial dependence. The magic is entirely in the consistency. It is not in finding the perfect investment. It is not in waiting for the right moment. It is in the daily discipline of spending less than you earn and investing the difference, year after year, season after season, until the harvest arrives. Now, many people say they cannot save because their income is too small, and sometimes this is genuinely true. There are real constraints that I do not want to dismiss. But often, more often than people are comfortable admitting, the real constraint is not the income. It is the spending. It is the choices. It is the decision to spend first and save what is left, which is almost always nothing, instead of saving first and living on what remains. Pay yourself first. This is old wisdom. It is not new, but it is daily discipline, practiced consistently, that transforms this wisdom from a concept into a life. The marketplace rewards value. Save and invest consistently. Work harder on yourself than on your job. These are not three separate ideas. They are three facets of the same philosophy, the philosophy of personal responsibility for your own financial future. Now I want to talk to you about relationships and about the discipline of nourishing them daily. Here is something I have observed about human beings. Most people treat their most important relationships the way they treat their health. They take them for granted in the ordinary seasons, and they attend to them only in the emergency. The marriage that receives little daily nourishment becomes, over years, either a formal arrangement or a source of quiet grief. The children who receive little daily attention will find their own sources of attention, and a parent may not like what those sources are. The friendship that is never nurtured grows distant and then simply disappears, not with any single event, but with the slow accumulation of unreturned calls and postponed visits and conversations that never happened. Relationships are gardens. Weeds grow without effort. Flowers require cultivation. So does a good life. The daily discipline of relationships is not dramatic. It is not the grand gesture, the expensive gift, the once-a-year vacation. It is much quieter than that. It is the daily attention, the question asked with genuine interest, the conversation given full presence, the evening spent together rather than side by side on separate devices, the small act of kindness that says, without words, you matter to me. I see you. I am here. I have seen people build extraordinary careers and accumulate significant wealth who, at the end, were profoundly lonely. Not because they were unlovable, but because they had not practiced the disciplines of connection. They had been so focused on what they were building that they forgot to tend the relationships that make the building worthwhile. Work is important, achievement is important, financial security is important, but it is all in service of something, and that something is a well-lived life, which requires people, connection, love, friendship, community, belonging. Do not neglect these in the pursuit of the others. The daily discipline of relationships means asking yourself, who did I love well today? Who did I listen to? Who did I encourage? Who am I grateful for? And have I told them? These questions, asked consistently, produce a kind of richness that no amount of money can purchase. Now let me spend some time on something that I think is perhaps the most important philosophical element of what we have been discussing, and that is the discipline of attitude, of perspective, of how you choose to see what happens to you. I have said for many years that it is not what happens to you that determines your life. It is what you do with what happens to you. And before you can do anything constructive with what happens to you, you have to decide how you are going to see it. The same event, a business loss, a failed relationship, a missed opportunity, a health challenge, can be seen as a disaster or as a lesson, can be carried as a wound or used as a stepping stone, can produce bitterness or wisdom. The event itself does not determine which. You determine which by the choice you make about how to interpret it. This is not naive positivity. I am not telling you to pretend that difficulty is not difficult. I am not telling you that pain is not painful or that loss is not real. These things are real. The difficulty is real. But you are not a passive recipient of your circumstances. You are an active interpreter, and the interpretation you choose becomes the reality you inhabit. The discipline of attitude means each morning making a conscious choice about how you will see the day ahead. Not with blind optimism. The day may not go as planned. Things will go wrong. People will disappoint you. The weather will not cooperate. But with a fundamental set of expectations about life and about yourself. Expect that things will be difficult and decide in advance that you are adequate to the difficulty. Expect that people will sometimes be unreliable and decide in advance that you will not be destroyed by it. Expect that the progress you want will be slower than you would like, and decide in advance that you will persist through the slowness. Expect the winters, and decide in advance that you will plant even so. Some people wait for conditions to be perfect before they begin. They wait for the economy to improve, for the children to be grown, for the debt to be reduced, for the right moment to arrive. And the right moment never arrives, because perfect conditions are a myth. The conditions will never be ideal. The world will never cooperate completely. The timing will always be imperfect. The discipline of attitude is the ability to begin anyway, to plant in imperfect soil, to work in uncertain weather, to build on a foundation that is not yet as solid as you would like. Because here is the truth. The person who begins imperfectly and persists will always outperform the person who waits for perfection and never begins. The set of the sail. It is not the blowing of the wind that determines where you end up. It is the set of the sail. The wind blows on us all. The same economy, the same market, the same conditions, the same blowing of circumstance. And some people go east, and some go west, and some stay where they are. The difference is the set of the sail, and the set of the sail is attitude, philosophy, the decision about how you will interpret what happens to you and what you will do with it. Now let me expand on the discipline of work more deeply. Here is what I mean when I say work harder on yourself than you do on your job. I mean the daily effort of self-development that most employees never make. Most employees study their company's product enough to do their current job. They learn the minimum the position requires, and then they stop. They do not read about their industry. They do not study the people who have excelled in their field. They do not invest their evenings or their weekends in developing capabilities that go beyond what their current paycheck demands. This is completely understandable, and it is completely costly. The person who studies beyond the requirements of their current position is not doing extra work for their employer. They are doing investment work for themselves. They are compounding their own value. And the remarkable thing about the marketplace is that value, once developed, is portable. It belongs to you. Your employer cannot take it. A job loss cannot destroy it. An economic downturn cannot dissolve it. The knowledge you build, the skills you develop, the reputation you earn, these are your assets, and they grow with every hour you invest in them. I remember a young man in one of my audiences many years ago, a young man in his mid-20s working in sales. He asked me after the seminar, "Mr. Rohn, I am already working hard. I am putting in long hours. What more can I do?" And I asked him, "How many books have you read in the last year about the craft of selling?" He thought about it. He said, "Maybe one." I said, "Read 12, one per month, not novels. Books on communication, on human psychology, on the history of great salespeople, on the structure of persuasion. Read 12 books next year and tell me what happens." He wrote me a letter 2 years later. He said he had read 24 books in those 2 years, and he had nearly doubled his income. Not because the books contained magic formulas, because the books changed how he thought about his work. They gave him perspective and sophistication and vocabulary that he simply did not have before. They made him more valuable. That is what self-education does. It is not decoration. It is not resume padding. It is the genuine, substantive expansion of your capacity to produce value. And the marketplace will pay for that expansion, consistently and reliably. Work harder on yourself, every day. Not in a way that exhausts you or destroys your balance, but in a way that is sustainable and consistent, and over time, transformative. Now let me talk about something related to work but distinct from it, and that is the discipline of goals, of knowing with specificity what you are working toward. Here is what I have found. Most people have wishes. Very few people have goals. And the difference between a wish and a goal is the difference between a hope and a plan. A wish says, I would like things to be different. I would like more money, more time, more freedom, a better relationship, a better body, a better life. A wish is passive. It hopes that circumstances will change. It hopes that the world will cooperate. It is attached to a vague desire, but unconnected to any specific action. A goal is different. A goal has a number and a date. A goal has a plan, a set of specific actions that, when taken, lead in the direction of the goal. A goal has been written down, which is the first act of commitment. And a goal is reviewed regularly, daily, in fact, so that the mind is consistently oriented toward it. Let me ask you something. Could you tell me right now, without hesitation, your 5 most important goals for the next 12 months? Not vague directions, not general improvements. Specific, measurable targets with specific timelines? If you cannot, then you are working without a destination. And you may arrive somewhere. We all arrive somewhere. But you are unlikely to arrive where you would have chosen. The daily discipline of goals begins with writing them down. Every morning, if possible, just spending a few minutes reviewing what you are working toward. This does more than remind you of the target. It trains your brain to notice opportunities relevant to your goals. It keeps your attention organized. It prevents the day from taking you in random directions. My mentor, Mr. Schoaf, told me very early on, Jim, write down what you want. Simple instruction. And for many years, I was better at this than at other times. But when I was most consistent with it, when I was writing my goals daily and reviewing them regularly, those were the periods of most rapid progress. Not because magic was happening, because my attention was organized. I was consistently asking myself, in everything I did, does this move me toward what I have said I want, or away from it? That question, does this move me toward my goals or away from them, is one of the most useful questions available in the daily routine. Applied consistently, it produces a kind of focus and intentionality that nothing else quite replicates. Write down what you want. Review it daily. Take at least one action toward it today. These are not complicated disciplines, but practiced consistently, they transform the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Now I want to talk about something that many people overlook in conversations about daily routine and personal development, and that is the discipline of rest and renewal. Here's the thing about disciplines. They work best when they are sustainable. A furious sprint of self-improvement that lasts 3 weeks and then collapses in exhaustion produces less than a quiet, consistent practice that continues for 3 years. And one of the things that makes practice sustainable is deliberate rest. I am not talking about laziness. I am not talking about using rest as an excuse to avoid the disciplines. I am talking about the intelligent recognition that human beings are not machines, and that rest and renewal are part of the discipline cycle, not exceptions to it. Think of the farmer again. After harvest, the field rests. The soil is not worked continuously, year-round, without pause. The fallow period, the period of rest, is part of the productivity cycle. The earth needs time to renew its nutrients, to recover its capacity, to be ready for the next season of planting. You are the same. The person who works without rest, who never takes a day to restore, who treats every quiet moment as an opportunity for more productivity, this person eventually breaks down. Not dramatically, usually, but quietly. The thinking becomes less sharp. The creativity diminishes. The patience frays. The quality of the work declines even as the hours increase. Rest is not the opposite of discipline. Rest is a discipline. The discipline of knowing when to stop, when to restore, when to allow the field of your mind and your body to renew. What does restoration look like in a daily routine? It looks different for different people. For some, it is a morning walk without earphones, just the sound of the world and the freedom of unstructured thought. For others, it is time with family, genuine unplugged time, without the divided attention of the device in the pocket. For others, it is an evening of reading something entirely for pleasure, with no agenda and no improvement objective. For others still, it is prayer or meditation, or a long bath, or a quiet conversation with someone they love. The point is that your daily routine should include not just the disciplines of production and growth, but the disciplines of renewal. And these should be taken seriously, not guiltily. They are not stolen time. They are invested time. Because the person who is restored brings more to everything else they do. Some people collapse on the weekends, not because they are resting, but because they have been depleted all week, and the weekend is when the depletion shows up. That is not restoration. That is recovery from damage. True restoration is more proactive. It is the regular, deliberate investment in the renewal of energy before the depletion reaches a crisis level. Build renewal into your daily routine, not as a reward for finishing the work, as an essential component of a sustainable life. Now let me spend some time on something I touched earlier that deserves its own full treatment. I want to talk about the discipline of language, about how you speak to yourself and about your life. Language is not decoration. Language is thought. The words you use to describe your experience are not merely reports on how you feel. They are, in part, creating how you feel. They are shaping how you see what happens to you. They are determining, in subtle but powerful ways, what you notice and what you miss, what you pursue and what you avoid. Here is what I mean. Two people face the same setback, a business failure, a rejection, a significant disappointment. One person says, "I am a failure. I always get this wrong. This is the story of my life." The other says, "That didn't work. Let me figure out what went wrong and try a different approach." Both people are responding to the same event, but the language they use to describe it is constructing two entirely different realities. One language closes doors, the other opens them. This is not about positive thinking in the superficial sense. I am not suggesting that you pretend the failure was not a failure. It was. Call it what it is. But the language you use after the honest assessment, the language that determines what the failure means for your future, that language matters enormously. The person who says, "This failed, and I will figure out why and do better," that person has made the failure a tuition payment in the school of experience. The person who says, "This failed, and it confirms my worst fears about myself and my prospects," that person has made the failure a sentence. Daily, in the way you talk to yourself, in the quiet running commentary that most people maintain without examining, you are either building a case for your potential or building a case against it. You are either speaking in the language of possibility or the language of limitation. And the remarkable thing is that most people do not choose this language consciously. They inherited it. It was given to them by their early environment, by the voices of parents and teachers and peers, and it has been running on autopilot ever since. The discipline of language means becoming conscious of this internal commentary and gradually, deliberately, rewriting the parts of it that do not serve you. I am not suggesting that this is easy or quick. A lifetime of habitual language does not change in a week, but it does change with consistent, conscious attention. Every time you catch yourself using language that diminishes you, language that declares permanent limitation, language that blames circumstances for your condition, language that denies your capacity for growth, you have a choice. You can let that language stand, or you can replace it in the moment with language that is honest but more constructive. This is hard is honest. This is hard and I am adequate to it is honest and expansive. I made a mistake is honest. I made a mistake and I will learn from it is honest and forward moving. I don't know how to do this is honest. I don't know how to do this yet is honest and open. These are small adjustments. They seem trivial, but practiced daily, applied consistently to the hundreds of small internal assessments you make about yourself and your life, they gradually shift the quality of your thinking. And the quality of your thinking is the quality of your life. Guard your language. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you are trying to help, with honesty, with care, and with genuine belief in their capacity for growth. And let me say one final thing on this subject. Be careful how you speak about other people, too. The person who speaks poorly of others, who gossips and criticizes and tears down, is not just being unkind to the subject of that conversation. They are building something inside themselves, a habit of negative evaluation that will eventually turn on them as well. The mind that looks for what is wrong in others develops a reflex for finding what is wrong. And that reflex does not stay neatly confined to other people. It becomes the lens through which all experience is interpreted. Speak well, of yourself, of others, of what is possible. Not naively, not dishonestly, but with the generosity and expectation of someone who has decided to see the world through the lens of what can be built rather than what cannot. Let me also say something about gratitude, about the daily discipline of recognizing what is already good, what is already working, what is already here to be appreciated. Here is what I have found. Ungrateful people are rarely successful people. Not because the universe punishes ingratitude. I will leave the metaphysics of that to others. But because the ungrateful person is not paying attention to what is working. They are focused entirely on what is missing, what is lacking, what is not yet here. And this focus, while sometimes motivating, is more often paralyzing. Because a person who cannot see the value in what they already have rarely develops the appreciation required to steward more. Gratitude is not sentimentality. It is a form of accurate accounting. It is looking at your current situation honestly and recognizing what is genuinely good about it. Not because you want to pretend the difficulties are not real, but because a balanced accounting requires that you also see the assets. The morning discipline of gratitude, just taking a few minutes to acknowledge specifically what is good about your life, changes the filter through which the rest of the day is experienced. It is not a magic cure for difficulty, but it is a reliable recalibration of attention, and attention is among the most powerful forces in your daily life. What you attend to, you amplify. What you ignore, you diminish. If you attend to what is wrong every morning, you will find more and more of what is wrong throughout your day. If you attend to what is good, genuinely, specifically good, you will find more and more of it as well. Not because you are wearing rose-colored glasses, because you have trained your perception to be more complete. A grateful person is also a more generous person. They give more freely because they experience abundance. They encourage more readily because they see possibility. They are better to be around, and therefore they attract better associations, which compounds their good fortune over time. Include gratitude in your daily routine. 5 minutes, written if you can, because writing makes the gratitude specific and real in a way that vague feeling does not. Write down 3 things that are genuinely good today, not grand things necessarily. The conversation with your child over breakfast, the clear morning sky, the work you do that someone finds valuable, the health that allows you to sit here and think and choose and build. These are not small things. They are the texture of a good life, and acknowledging them daily ensures that you actually experience them, not just live through them on the way to something else. Now let me bring this back to where we began, and speak more specifically about the relationship between the daily routine and the long arc of a life. I want to tell you something about time because I think most people have a distorted relationship with it. Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year, and they dramatically underestimate what they can accomplish in 10. This asymmetry is responsible for an enormous amount of unnecessary frustration and discouragement. You set out in January to transform your life. You are reading, exercising, saving money, tending your relationships, growing your skills. By March, the transformation has not arrived. By April, it feels like all the effort is producing nothing. By May, the disciplines have faded. By the following January, you are starting over, having lost the ground you gained and the time you invested. This cycle, repeated enough times, convinces people that they simply cannot change. But that is not the right conclusion. The right conclusion is that they have been expecting a harvest too soon. The seed they planted in January needed not 3 months, but 3 years to produce its fruit, and they walked away from the field before the harvest. Think about the disciplines we have discussed. What if you read consistently for 1 year and nothing dramatic changed? Would you stop? Most people would. But here's what happened in that year. You read perhaps 15 books. Your thinking expanded in ways you cannot yet measure. Your vocabulary improved. Your frame of reference broadened. The seeds were planted. But seeds do not announce themselves on the first day. They work invisibly, underground, for a long time before they break the surface. What if you maintained those disciplines, not for 1 year, but for 5? The 15 books become 75. The daily reflection has produced years of journal entries, a record of your own development development, your own thinking, your own growth that you could look back on and trace. The financial discipline, practiced for 5 years, has built a meaningful reserve. The health disciplines have created a body that functions with energy and clarity. The associations have shifted, gradually, toward people of greater ambition and greater wisdom. The daily work habit has produced compounding skill in your field. At 5 years, the transformation is visible, unmistakable. The people who knew you 5 years ago would notice the difference, and most of them would attribute it to luck, to some circumstance, some event, some advantage you stumbled into. Because the work was invisible. The disciplines were quiet. Nobody saw the 30 minutes of reading each morning. Nobody saw the 15 minutes of journaling each evening. Nobody saw the small financial choices, the decision to save rather than spend, the deliberate cultivation of better associations. Nobody sees the seed growing underground. They only see the tree. That is how an extraordinary life is built. It looks sudden from the outside. It never is. Now, I am aware that everything I have said today can sound, in summary, like a great deal. Read every day. Reflect every day. Guard your associations. Do focused work. Design your finances. Tend your relationships. Practice gratitude. Cultivate your language. Rest deliberately. Set goals. Review them daily. And if you look at that list as a to-do list, it is indeed a great deal. Too much, perhaps, to begin all at once. But here is the thing. I am not asking you to begin everything at once. I am asking you to develop a philosophy, a way of seeing your daily life that recognizes it as the most important field you tend, and then to begin adding disciplines to that field, one at a time, as you are ready. Start with the reading. That is where I always recommend people start, because reading changes thinking, and thinking changes everything else. Read for 30 minutes each morning on a subject that matters to your growth. Do that for 90 days, and see if your thinking has not begun to shift. Then add the reflection, a journal, 15 minutes at the end of the day. Write about what you did, what you learned, what you would do differently. Then look at your associations. Not dramatically, don't make pronouncements and end friendships, but quietly, begin to be more deliberate. Seek out one new association this month with someone who is ahead of you in an area where you want to grow. Then look at your work. What is the most important thing you can do tomorrow morning before anything else? Do that first. Then look at your finances. Are you paying yourself first? Even a small percentage, invested consistently, changes your relationship with money and with the future. Build the disciplines one at a time. Each one you add makes the next one easier, because the daily routine itself becomes a structure, and the structure supports the disciplines within it. Within a year, if you are consistent, you will have a daily routine that is, in every meaningful sense, building your future. Not hoping for it, not waiting for it, building it, morning by morning, discipline by discipline, choice by choice. And the remarkable thing, the thing I have seen in person, in conversations with thousands of people over 4 decades, is that the person who has built this kind of daily routine also changes in less measurable but equally important ways. They become more confident, not because they are telling themselves they are great, but because they are keeping commitments to themselves daily, and they know it. Their word to themselves is reliable, and that reliability produces a kind of self-respect that is neither arrogant nor fragile. They become more patient because they understand the seasons and they trust the harvest. They do not need immediate results to stay committed because their commitment is rooted in philosophy rather than mood. They become more generous because they are not operating from scarcity. The person who is growing does not fear others' success. It inspires them because they understand that success is not a limited resource, and they become more at peace, not because their life is free of difficulty, but because they face the difficulty with the confidence of someone who has been building their character and their capacity day after day for years. The difficulty is real, but so is their preparedness, and preparedness changes everything about how difficulty is experienced. This is the ultimate harvest of the daily routine, not just the external achievements, as meaningful as those are, but the internal transformation, the becoming of a person who is adequate to the life they have chosen to build. That transformation, that is the deepest secret hidden in your daily routine. Let me now bring these threads together and speak to you about the cumulative effect, about what happens when all of these disciplines are practiced together, consistently, over time. There is a concept in mathematics called compounding, the idea that a small percentage of growth, applied consistently over time, produces results that seem almost miraculous in their scale. A modest investment, growing at a modest rate, becomes, after enough time, something extraordinary. Not because of any single brilliant decision, because of consistency, because of time applied to a sound principle. The disciplines we have discussed today are exactly like that. No single day of reading will make you a great thinker. No single morning of reflection will give you profound wisdom. No single investment will build your fortune. No single act of kindness will transform your most important relationship. But these things, done every day, for years, for decades, compound in exactly the same way that money compounds. And here is what the compounding produces, eventually, when you have practiced long enough. Options, choices, freedom. The freedom to do work you find meaningful because you have developed the skills to be compensated regardless of employer. The freedom to be with people you genuinely love because you have tended those relationships. The freedom to think clearly and independently because you have filled your mind consistently with the best ideas available. The freedom to face difficulty with equanimity because your philosophy is deep enough to sustain. This is the harvest of the disciplined daily routine. Not wealth alone, though wealth is part of it. Not achievement alone, though achievement is part of it. But a wholeness, an integration, a sense that your life is being designed rather than suffered. A sense that you are driving rather than being driven. Let me give you a specific example of the mathematics of this. And I want you to hold it as a picture, not just a concept. Imagine two people, both 30 years old, both starting from roughly the same place. One of them, let's call him the disciplined man, decides to read 30 minutes every morning, save 10% of everything he earns, spend 30 minutes each evening in reflection and planning, and exercise 3 days a week. Nothing heroic, modest daily disciplines, practiced consistently. The other person, equally capable, equally smart, perhaps even more naturally gifted, continues in the comfortable patterns of the majority, reads occasionally when he feels like it, spends roughly what he earns, perhaps a bit more, lets his evenings drift, postpones the health discipline for a better time. At 31, you cannot tell the difference. They look the same. Their income is similar. Their lives are similar. Their circles of friends are similar. At 35, there are small signs. The disciplined man is a bit sharper in conversation. He references things he has read. He has a modest savings account. His health is a little better. His career trajectory is slightly upward. Nothing dramatic. At 40, the gap is noticeable. The disciplined man has read perhaps 150 books. His thinking has the depth and range that comes from years of deliberate input. He has a growing financial reserve. His associations have shifted. He is spending time with people who are doing interesting things. His career has advanced, not through one lucky break, but through the gradual accumulation of skill and reputation and value in the marketplace. At 50, the lives are genuinely different. One man has options, the other has obligations. One man has the confidence of someone who has kept his word to himself for 20 years. The other has a vague unease, not crisis, but a quiet sense that the life he has could have been so much more. The compounding happened quietly. It happened in the invisible hours. It happened in the small choices that seemed, on any given Tuesday morning, utterly unremarkable. That is the story of the daily routine. And it is your story, too, whichever version you choose to write. Some people will read this or hear it and feel a momentary surge of inspiration. They will think, yes, this is it. This is what I need to do. And the inspiration is real. I do not dismiss it. But inspiration without translation into daily discipline is simply a pleasant experience. It comes and goes. It leaves you roughly where it found you. The question is not whether you feel inspired. The question is what you do tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and the one after that. Because your future is built there, in those ordinary mornings, in those unremarkable hours, in those small daily choices that nobody else is watching and nobody else will grade. Let me say one more thing about this, and it is perhaps the most important thing I have said today. Many people hear a philosophy like this and they are energized, but they are also, somewhere beneath the energy, skeptical. They think, this sounds right, but is it really enough? Is reading and reflecting and maintaining my health and tending my relationships and managing my attitude really going to produce the life I want? It sounds too simple. And I understand that skepticism because I felt it once myself. I felt it sitting across from Mr. Schoaf, hearing ideas that sounded reasonable but seemed, perhaps, too understated to matter. Here is what I would say to that skepticism. Simplicity is not the same as insignificance. The most powerful forces in the natural world are often simple. Gravity is simple. The seasons are simple. The principle of planting and harvesting is simple. But simplicity does not diminish their power. It concentrates it. The daily disciplines we have discussed are simple. They are not easy. Simple and easy are very different things, but they are simple. And their power is not in any dramatic single application. Their power is in the accumulation, in the compounding, in the patient, consistent, season after season practice that over time transforms an ordinary life into an extraordinary one. Let me speak to you for a few minutes about something that I believe is both practical and philosophical, and that is the discipline of service, of contributing to others as a daily practice. Here is what I have observed in the most fulfilled people I have known over my lifetime. They were not primarily focused on what they could get. They were primarily focused on what they could give. Not as a technique, not as some transactional strategy dressed up as generosity, but as a genuine expression of their values and their understanding of how a life well lived is constructed. The person who asks every morning, "What can I contribute today?" That person is aligned with something larger than their own immediate interests. And there is an energy that comes from that alignment, a sense of purpose that transcends the ordinary frustrations and disappointments of daily life. Because when your day is organized around contribution, even the difficult days feel meaningful. You are doing something for someone beyond yourself, and that meaning sustains you through the weather of difficulty. Now, I want to be careful not to be naive about this. I am not saying that financial success is unimportant. I have spent decades teaching people how to build their income and their wealth, and I believe that is important. Financial security enables contribution. It gives you the freedom, the resources, and the capacity to serve others in ways that are simply not possible when you are struggling. But here is the sequence that I have found to be true, and it surprises people when I say it. Serve first, and the compensation will follow. Bring more value to every person you encounter than they expect. Give more than you take in every transaction. Build your reputation around genuine service, around caring about the outcome for the other person as much as your own. And you will find, over time, that the marketplace rewards this philosophy with extraordinary consistency. People sense authenticity. They sense whether you care, and they reward the people who care. Not immediately, perhaps, not in every single transaction, but over the long arc of a career, of a business, of a life in the marketplace. The daily discipline of service means asking, in every interaction, am I genuinely trying to help this person? Not just going through the motions of helpfulness while thinking primarily about my own gain, but actually bringing myself to the problem of how this person can be better served by my effort and my attention. This is not easy. It requires a shift from the natural human tendency towards self-focus. But it is a discipline, and like all disciplines, it can be practiced, it can be strengthened, and when it becomes habitual, when service becomes your default orientation rather than an occasional effort, something remarkable happens. Your work becomes richer, your relationships deepen, your reputation grows in ways you cannot manufacture through any other means. Serve well every day, not as a strategy, as an expression of who you are choosing to become. Now let me talk about something that I think is neglected in most conversations about daily routines, and that is the discipline of long-term thinking, of holding your future self in mind as you make your present-day decisions. Here is the challenge. Human beings are naturally oriented toward the present. The immediate pleasure, the immediate comfort, the immediate relief. These are vivid and real. The future consequence, the future benefit, the future harvest. These are abstract, distant, easy to minimize. This is why the daily discipline is hard, not because it requires superhuman effort, but because it requires choosing a distant reward over an immediate one, repeatedly, in the face of a mind that is always slightly more interested in now than in later. The person who does not exercise today feels better today. They avoided discomfort. The person who exercises today feels worse today, but better a year from now. The mathematics are clear, and almost everyone understands them. But understanding is not the same as feeling, and in the moment of choice, the feeling of the immediate tends to win over the understanding of the eventual. The discipline of long-term thinking means finding a way to make the future vivid, to make it feel real enough in the present moment that it can compete with the immediate pull of the easier choice. Here is one way I have found to do this. Write a letter to your future self, to the person you intend to be in 10 years. Describe that person's life in detail, where they live, what they do, who they are surrounded by, what they have built. how they feel about the life they are living. Make it specific, make it real. And then keep that letter somewhere you can read it, and read it regularly. When you read it regularly, the future self becomes less abstract. You can see them. And when you can see them, when you can feel the reality of who you are becoming, the daily disciplines connect to something larger than the day itself. The 30 minutes of reading is no longer just reading. It is the version of you in 10 years who is extraordinary at their craft because of this 30 minutes, and this 30 minutes, and this 30 minutes. Every daily discipline is a vote for who you are becoming. Cast the votes consistently, and the person they elect is the person you will be. Let me also speak to you about the discipline of completion, about the importance of finishing what you start. Here is what I have found. Incomplete things cost you more than you realize. Not just in terms of the outcomes they fail to produce, but in terms of the psychological weight they carry. Every project started and abandoned. Every promise made and unfulfilled. Every commitment to yourself that was not kept. These accumulate. They do not disappear. They sit in the back of your mind and they drain energy and confidence in ways that are difficult to see, but very real to feel. The person who has a pattern of abandoning their initiatives, who starts things with enthusiasm and leaves them before completion, that person begins to lose faith in their own word. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. They begin to think, well, I always say I'm going to do this, but I never actually do it. And that thought becomes a self-fulfilling expectation. The discipline of completion is the discipline of rebuilding trust in yourself, of teaching your mind that when you make a commitment, it is real and it will be honored. This does not mean you must complete every project regardless of circumstances. It means being thoughtful about what you start, so that what you start is worth finishing, and then finishing it. Start fewer things if necessary, but finish what you start. Let the discipline of completion become part of your identity. Let the words, "I finish what I begin," be not just an aspiration, but a description. There is an enormous confidence that comes from this, a kind of earned self-assurance, because you know when you begin something that you will follow it through. And that knowledge changes how you begin. You approach new commitments with more care because you take them seriously. You commit to fewer things, but more deeply. You say yes more deliberately and no more comfortably. The daily discipline of completion begins with today. What did you say you would do today? Did you do it? If not, not because circumstances intervened, but because the easier choice was available. What does that tell you? And more importantly, what are you going to do tomorrow? Keep your word to yourself every day, in the small things, especially in the small things, because the small things are not small. They are the daily practice of integrity. And integrity, practiced daily in the small things, produces a character that is adequate to the large things when they arrive. Now let me speak about patience, because everything I have said today requires it, and I want to honor that. The disciplines I have described do not produce immediate results. That is the entire point. If they produced immediate results, everyone would practice them. Everyone would be extraordinary. The results would be visible immediately, and the motivation would sustain itself easily. But the results are not immediate. They are distant. And between the discipline and the harvest, there is a period, sometimes a very long period, of faith, of continuing to plant even when you cannot see anything growing, of showing up for the 30 minutes of reading when there is no prize, no grade, no acknowledgement, of choosing the better association when the easier one is always available, of investing in your financial future when the present wants every dollar. This period, the period between the planting and the visible harvest, is where most people stop. Not because they lack the will to continue forever, but because they cannot see the progress. And the inability to see progress is experienced as evidence that no progress is occurring. But progress is occurring. The seed is growing underground. The roots are forming before anything appears above the surface. The character is deepening. The mind is expanding. The bank account, small as it may seem, is building the foundation. The relationships, tended daily, are growing in depth and warmth. You simply cannot see it yet. Patience is the discipline of trusting the process when the results are invisible. It is not passive waiting. It is active, disciplined continuing. Planting even in winter, if that is the season. Weeding even when the flowers are not yet visible. Tending the field with the same care, whether it is visibly producing or not. My father farmed for decades. And he told me once, it was an evening in late fall. I remember the light was going and the harvest was in. He told me that the real skill of farming is not in the planting or even in the harvest. It is in the tending, in the daily, unremarkable, unsexy work of maintenance and care that happens between the planting and the harvest. Anyone can plant with enthusiasm. The farmer is the one who shows up every day in between. That is the discipline of patience. Show up every day in between. And if you do, if you genuinely practice these disciplines with consistency and patience, through the seasons of discouragement and the winters of difficulty, the harvest will come. It always comes. Nature does not fail to honor a well-tended field, and life does not fail to honor a well-tended daily routine. The harvest belongs to those who plant. I was 25 years old and broke, as I mentioned. $6 in my pocket. Promises I couldn't keep. And someone, a generous man who could have simply gone home to his own comfortable life, sat with me and gave me a philosophy. He did not give me money. He did not give me contacts. He did not give me a shortcut. He gave me a way of seeing the world that, practiced daily, changed everything. That is what I have tried to give you today. Not a technique, not a system, a philosophy. A way of understanding what your daily life is really for and what it is really building. Because your daily life is not a waiting room. It is not the place you sit until the important things begin. Your daily life is where everything of substance gets made. It is where your character takes its final shape. It is where your future gets constructed, morning by morning, decision by decision, discipline by discipline. You know what to do. The remarkable thing is not that people don't know. The remarkable thing is that people do know and still choose the easier path, the comfortable path, the path of least resistance. Not because they are bad people, because the easier path is always available and always feels justified in the moment. The mind is extraordinarily creative at constructing reasons why today is an exception, why tomorrow would be better, why the circumstances require a pause in the disciplines. Do not be fooled by those reasons. I have had them. You have had them. They are real feelings and false logic, and they have cost many people their finest years. Let me say one more thing before we close, and it is perhaps the most personal thing I can offer you. It is about the courage that is required. Because everything I have described today, the reading, the reflection, the careful management of associations, the daily disciplines of work and health and finance and relationship, all of it requires a kind of quiet courage that is rarely discussed. Not the dramatic courage of the battlefield or the emergency, the quiet courage of choosing differently from the people around you, the courage to read when others are watching television, the courage to save when others are spending, the courage to think for yourself when the crowd is thinking one way, the courage to begin again after you have stopped, without the fanfare of a dramatic recommitment, just quietly picking up the discipline again the next morning. This kind of courage is not celebrated. Nobody will throw you a parade for reading your book. Nobody will congratulate you on the way you managed your morning. The disciplines of a well-designed daily life are invisible to others. They are practiced in the private hours, without acknowledgement, without applause, without external validation. And that invisibility is actually the point, because what you are building in those private hours is a life that belongs entirely to you, not to your employer, not to your social media followers, not to the expectations of your community. A life built from your own choices, shaped by your own disciplines, expressing your own most deeply held values. That is the life worth building. I have given this message in small rooms and large arenas. I have given it to people at the beginning of their working lives and to people who have been working for 40 years. And the thing I am always most moved by is not the people who react with enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is common. But the people who sit quietly after, and you can see something settling in them, something landing, a recognition they already knew somewhere. They just needed someone to say it clearly enough, with enough care that they could finally hear it. You already know. The secret to your future is not a secret at all. It is simply your daily routine, practiced with intention, sustained with philosophy, and honored with the patience of someone who understands the seasons. Here is the final thought I want to leave you with, and it is this. It is not too late. I do not care how old you are, how long you have been away from the disciplines, how many seasons have passed without the planting you intended. It is not too late. The field will accept new seeds whenever you are ready to plant them. The harvest may come later than you would have liked. That is a real consequence, and I will not pretend otherwise. But the harvest will come. The person who starts the daily disciplines at 35 will not have the harvest they would have had if they had started at 25. That is simply true. But they will have a far richer harvest than the person who starts at 45. And the person who starts at 45 will have more than the person who never starts at all. Start now. Not with a dramatic overhaul. Not with a complete restructuring of your life that requires perfect conditions to sustain. Start with one discipline, one daily practice, something you can do tomorrow morning regardless of how things are arranged. Read for 30 minutes. Write in a journal for 15 minutes. Walk for 20 minutes and think. Choose one association to deepen and one to reduce. Start small. Start now. And trust the mathematics of consistency. That small daily effort applied over time compounds into something you cannot currently imagine. The seed does not look like the tree. The daily discipline does not look like the life it produces. But one becomes the other, as surely as spring becomes summer and summer becomes fall. The seasons do not miss a beat, and neither will you, once you decide that your daily routine is not a minor footnote to your life. It is your life. Build it well. I have spent 40 years giving this message, and what I have found is that the people who hear it and truly receive it, who let it settle into their philosophy, not just their to-do list, these people change, quietly, consistently, without announcement. They begin to treat their mornings differently. They begin to treat their reading differently. They begin to treat the people in their lives differently. And 5 years later, 10 years later, they look back from a place they could not have imagined from where they were standing when they first heard these ideas. This is not magic. This is not luck. This is not a mystery. This is the harvest. And it belongs to those who plant. The soil is ready. The season is here. The only question left, the only question that has ever mattered, is this one. What will you do tomorrow morning?